Alright, so I wanted to do a quick video regarding an alternator smoking on a LR3, 2007 LR3. A little bit of background, got in yesterday morning to leave and the vehicle had zero power, tested the battery. The battery was at 0 volts, there was no charge whatsoever. I hooked up a charger to it, it wouldn't even take a charge. I did have an Evermax start, Evermax battery that had a 3-year free replacement. So took it into Walmart, they checked it, it indeed was bad, and they swapped it out. I brought the new one home, put it in, hooked it up, intending to be done and good to go. Found out though that once I hooked up this terminal cable, that down in here, the alternator, at first I didn't know what it was, but there was a smell of what smelled like plastic melting or electrical wire burning or something like that. And so I immediately, of course, disconnected it. It had been connected probably for about 3 minutes maybe at that point, and I didn't notice it at first. So then I started poking around trying to figure out what it was. Ended up taking off the air filter and cleaner, put those off on the shelf, and tried to diagnose and figure out where the smoke was coming from, thinking maybe there was a wire that was heating up or something like that. Obviously the battery was dead before, so my assumption was that the whatever it is that was smoking was also the same thing that had drained or killed the battery from before. So after doing some digging, I had my wife come out and connect the battery while I was underneath of the vehicle, and indeed right from there where you see the alternator, that's, you can kind of see it down in there, but the smoke was coming up from there and just kind of wafting up, and so I could see that from underneath. And so did some research online, and indeed others have had that same problem where the alternator starts smoking. From what I read, it's basically due to a rectifier issue. Time being a little more of an essence and not wanting to directly dive into tearing an alternator apart and buying rectifier parts to fix this alternator, not knowing for sure that that's the issue. I do know that it's the alternator, just don't know that it's only the rectifier that's bad. So I chose to go ahead and replace the whole alternator. So I'm probably going to take you through a couple of those steps and show you how I'm doing it, and then I'll get back to you once I have more details. I'll be back in a bit. Alright, so the first step is obviously to take off the belt. There are 2 tensioner pulleys. The one that we're interested in is this inner one. You can see the socket in there, and I've got a pipe. I have a breaker bar, but it's a 1/2 inch, and this is a 3/8 hole. So my downsizer is actually broke. Last time I used it, I twisted it off. So what I've got is my 3/8 socket with the shortest little, I don't know, probably 1-inch extension. It's a tiny little extension. I'll pull it out and show you in a second. And then a breaker bar coming up here. So, or not a breaker bar, a pipe. So that way I can get some leverage on it. And basically the idea is to pull this tension. You can see it loosen down in there. So then what I'll do is I can't do this with the camera obviously, but I'll pull that tensioner and then relieve that the belt off of that pulley down there on the alternator, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, so here's the socket, just a little 1-inch 3/8 extension, nothing much. Alright, so the next step is to take out, here's the tire. I'm looking from the front towards the back. There is this ground panel. There's clips. I've already taken them out. One here, one there. There's little stems that you gotta pry out with a screwdriver. And then there's 2 more. One there and one there. Those are, it's like a little splash panel. So take those clips out and then remove that panel. Alright, so that panel is removed, and now we can see the alternator and the subsequent bolts there that need to be pulled out. There's 2 there. I don't know if I can get my camera up in there for you to see, but there is one up top there that's going to need to be removed. So that bolt and those 2 along with some wiring on the back. My plan is to remove those bolts
and then tip it up so I can get better access to the wiring in the back. We'll see. Maybe I'll reattach it and, you know, soft thread them and then get the wiring off. Alright, so the bottom two bolts are pretty easy to get to. The top bolt is a little bit challenging. I had to use like a 3-inch extension or so and reach my arm up and around there to feel where it's at and get to it. It's hard to see. I can kind of see it from down here, but once you get your hands up in there, it's kind of hard to see. So just a heads up, I happen to have a wrench that has a swivel bendable head on there, so it's easier to get up in there, but just as a heads up, even if you have a straight wrench, it'll still work. But it's a bit of a challenge, and just remember how you got it in and out. There's an interference with that pull. You can see the extension is resting right on it. So just remember how you got it out so you can get it back in easy. Alright, so the alternator is out. Some quick thoughts. Basically, I undid both of these bolts and then undid this one to where I could feel that it was loose. Then I put one of these ones back in, just kind of loose threaded it so I knew it was secure, and then finished taking this one out so it wasn't going to fall out of here. While this bolt was in, I went ahead and took this plug here off the back. There's a little pressure, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's a little thumb, you got to squeeze that and pull that out. It was a little tough to get to because it's kind of up behind here. And this just had a bolt on the nut on the back of it that went onto the post of the alternator. That nut and these three bolts are all 13 millimeter. So 13 millimeter wrench, 13 millimeter socket, whatever you got. That'll take care of all four of those. So just a quick update there, and then I'm actually waiting on the new one to be shipped to me. Once I get it, I will install it and give you any tips or tricks I found to get it back in. But it doesn't seem too complicated, pretty straightforward, but in case you're wondering how to do it, there it is. This is the belt tucked away that goes around the pulley. So that belt comes in, the pulley is right about here. So I've kind of tucked it up in there so it's easier to work, but that's where we're at on that one.
So one last thought. After I took it apart, I went and looked at the different terminals and everything around there, and was not able to see, or I can smell just a little bit of burning, but nothing major, nothing like I expected to see it. I expected to see a little more melting or something like that, but couldn't find that. I reconnected the battery and then watched and looked down in there, and there was no smoke or nothing substantial, nothing that I could notice. So I'm pretty confident it's the alternator, but I didn't see what I expected to see, which was some kind of melted or disturbed piece here. So I did take this cover off and look down inside there. I did a ohms test between this post and the ground to see if there was any connection for grounding. There was 150 ohms, which I expected a lot more, but I'll have to find out if that's legitimate or if that's a sign of degradation. Alright, so after a bit of delay here, I got my alternator in. Had some debate initially about whether to buy a OEM alternator from Land Rover. The cheapest I could find on that was about $350, I think it was, plus shipping, plus cord charge, etc. I ended up finding this alternator here from AutoZone. It's just a Duralast, lifetime limited warranty. I had read some reviews that said that, well, if you buy a remanufactured unit, the cheaper kind, then you're going to be replacing it every year. I'm doing the work myself. I don't anticipate replacing it every year, but if that is the case, I paid $188 for this unit. And you'll see that this was the old one. It's got the same setup as the new one. It's not, they didn't other than probably rewinding it and doing some internal stuff. I mean, it's the same thing. It doesn't look, to me, to be a replacement kind of a thing. It looks like it's an original that was remanufactured. So there's a performance certificate and that information. So it was remanufactured in Mexico, not in China. So my guess is I won't have the problems that other people might have stated, but I replaced an alternator in another vehicle of mine, and I've not had any problems with one manufactured in Mexico. I've never had to replace it or return it. So I think as long as I have this vehicle, which is probably another 5 or 10 years, I think I'll be fine. If for some reason it does go out, it's free. Get a new one. Versus the OEM one was $350 at the cheapest with a 6-month warranty. And if it went out in 7 months, I'm paying another $350 to get another one. So my recommendation, especially if you can do it yourself, or even if you can find a friend or a mechanic that'll do it for fairly cheap, I would guess if I had to do it again, it would take me probably about an hour to an hour and a half to remove it, replace it. It's not a big job. A panel down there to remove, bolts to take off, some wires. It's not like you have to drop the engine or transmission or something like that. So anyhow, I just wanted to kind of let you know that's what I had decided, and that's the reasons for it. So I'm going to go ahead and install it now, and we'll get her back up and running. Okay, one quick thing. The nut for the positive post terminal, this is the new one, and this is the old one. The old one is better constructed. It's a full nut with a built-in washer. This is just a lock washer with a little flimsy nut there. So I would suggest using the old one if it's not damaged, or if you can reuse it. Make sure to keep it. Alright, so I'm making this video as we go, of course. One thing I noticed, I started mounting the alternator. I got this bolt here in, goes into the engine there to hang it, and then I was going to put the 2 wires on and then do the follow-up bolts. I noticed that this positive post here, you see these 2 little holes? The original one has 4 holes, and the battery terminal that goes on here has a tab that goes in this side and that side. On the new one, there's a hole there for the tab. There's no hole over here for the tab. So the tab for the battery terminal will not fully seat unless you bend this tab, or unless you swap this little piece. Now I already took this one apart trying to see what was going on in there. So this piece here is removable. You can see it kind of moving there. And these 3 nuts will come off, and this piece will be removed. So I'll show you how to do that right now. Alright, so what you need here is an 8mm nut driver. And I just have an 8mm there, and just undo. I've already undone it because I can't do it with one hand. So undo these 3 nuts, and go ahead and lift carefully. Lift this top off, and then set it aside. And this little piece here will come off. Then do the same thing. I've already taken this one off. So just take this little piece and swap it over, pop it back on, and then reset your top and bolt it down. Nothing much to it. Alrighty, so some quick things. What I did is I put that top bolt in first. I hand tightened it. Just put it in far enough to where it would hold it, and it won't go on snug to the alternator. You'll feel the bolt start to tighten as it goes in before the alternator is ever snug. So it allows it to hang there and be a little free to move about. The positive post terminal, you kind of have to wiggle back and forth to get those tabs to seat down the holes that I showed you. So it's almost a 2-handed operation. I actually reached one hand around behind here, so I had 2 hands up there, one to kind of wiggle and push down, the other one to get the nut on. And then the other 3 battery wires, you can't quite see them from here, but those just pop in real nice and easy. So anyhow, now it's time to get the belt on, and you can see the belt tucked up in there. I'm actually leaving this panel here. I would suggest not putting this on
right away, this panel that goes right in here. Leave it off so you can get the belt on and inspect that the belt is all lined up before you put that panel on as the last thing. So, onto the belt. Alright, so in regards to the belt, again, I have a pipe on a wrench. I suggest putting it in front of this wire if you have this wire. I presume that you do, but put it in front because you're going to need to pull it this way quite a bit. So then when I take that, and then this pulls all the way down. I'm not going to do it right now because I have the belt back on. But this pulls all the way down, and it'll be kind of at this angle here to get it far enough. And then I reach my hand right down here, and I can reach down, and then I can get that belt onto the alternator. I did notice when I first released this tensioner that the belt had come off of that pulley. It had kind of jumped a tooth. So this is a serpentine belt, so you'll need to make sure that all the teeth are aligned onto the different pulleys so that the grooves line up. But really that was the only one that I had to make a minor adjustment on to get it to seat properly. So anyhow, that was a fairly simple task, but just make sure you got a good pull, as I mentioned before. Alright, so I just put the air cleaner back in place. This hose, I just kind of wiggle it back onto that and it'll seat. Just make sure this is not swung down around the bottom. Otherwise, it'll be hard to get it back up top because there's interference down there. So make sure this is on top when you push the hose on. This will just snap back on. This is a pinch connector that if you pinch it, it'll pull off. I did not show you the original removal of this, but anyhow, you just pinch that, pull it off. When you go to put it back on, you just snap it back on. This plug, make sure you get it up and around when you go to put it back on, that you bring it back on around and plug it back in. Just those two connections, and then of course the hose clamp there, and then all the nuts, all the screws going around the air cleaner. Those are the things to watch out for there. A quick comment here, this hose clamp, make sure that I would, instead of putting the collector up top, put it down over here. It's easier to kind of get to, it's not in the way, so this is clean up top, is down on the side. I wouldn't put it too far down because then you got to try and get down around there. And then also, so just make sure you don't over tighten these screws. Tighten them down secure, but don't over tighten them though. So we'll now put the cover on the engine. Of course, when you go to put the cover on, make sure you take the oil cap off, put the cover on, then put the oil cap back on. A 1/4 inch nut driver works great for these. There's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so real quick on this panel, I've put 3 in so far just to get it in place to show you, but basically I just take these the old caps, put this grommet piece in first. The end is flared, can you see that from the old? So you're going to have to kind of pinch it back together with the hole and let it pop in. And then you take this, the old center post, and line it up, and then just give it a good press, snap it back in, and then they're all back in place. Alright, last but not least, put the terminal back in the battery. This is a 13mm nut right there, so you can use the same 13mm from below. These are 5/16, so both of those for the battery clamp. Make sure it's tight in place. So 5/16 for those, 13mm for the terminal of the battery, and they should be good to go. My Land Rover I bought used, so I did not have it, but there should be a cover like that to go over here. The former person apparently did not want it and gave it a toss, but the cover seems to have these little clamps that you can just pull to unclamp and clamp back on, so I'm sure you can figure that out. But nonetheless, there it is. We'll start her up and see that everything works good. I did connect the battery and check. There's no smoking, there's no issues, no amperage being drawn, so other than initially for all the flaps and doors to move for initial boot up of the onboard computer.